Hello and welcome to Gareth Icke Tonight. We have peace in the Middle East, Donald Trump has proclaimed after a ceasefire deal was brokered and signed off in Egypt this week. Now it's time to get on with rebuilding Gaza, he says. The enclave has been bombed into rubble over the last 2 years, and so the returning Palestinians aren't actually returning to anything. Nothing apart from the mangled steel and piles of debris that were once their homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals. Now the job of clearing that rubble has begun, the true death toll will begin to form. Hundreds of bodies have already been dug out, but that number is just a drop in the ocean of what it will ultimately become. Trump, while talking about rebuilding Gaza, was pressed by journalists on whether this rebuild was to be part of a future Palestinian state. He dodged the question completely, of course, and instead reiterated that he was concentrating on simply rebuilding Gaza. So it begs the question, for whom is Trump rebuilding this place for? The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his fellow government and military officials and the biggest funders of Donald Trump's political career, the Adelsons, have made no secret of their belief in the biblical land of Israel. IDF soldiers fought in Gaza with patches of the Greater Israel map upon their shoulders, and Netanyahu has said openly just a few weeks ago that he was spiritually connected to the idea of the Greater Israel. In fact, the Likud party, of which Netanyahu is the head, a party founded by a terrorist, say clearly in their charter that from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. So from the river to the sea is okay when they say it. Okay. I'm not kidding about the terrorist part, by the way. Menachem Begin was the head of the Irgun terrorist group that blew up the King David Hotel, killing 96 people. It was, up until the London bombings of 2007, the largest death toll of British people in a terrorist attack in history. And Begin didn't just go on to found the Likud party, but he went on to become prime minister. And the Irgun terrorist group morphed into what? In 1948, you guessed it, the IDF. So with all of this in mind, and the desire for the Greater Israel, for Israeli sovereignty from the river to the sea, and the openly proclaimed belief that this land was promised to them by God, why then would the leaders of Israel be celebrating this peace deal, unless they know something we don't? Is it that they're celebrating the real deal, not the one being served up for public consumption? Is it that they know for Gaza to be rebuilt, then the Palestinians will have to be moved out, and that once that's happened, the door will be closed behind them? Is that why the deal to return all of the hostages, brokered on behalf of their families by Israeli hostage negotiator Gershon Baskin, well over a year ago, was turned down by Benjamin Netanyahu and his government? Because, of course, had that deal agreed with Hamas gone through and the hostages returned to their families, then the following year's worth of IDF bombardment with US weapons and UK intelligence would have had no justification, and the returning Palestinians would have had some homes to go back to. If any of Gaza was still standing, then the excuse to remove the entire population to facilitate the rebuild would have been, well, null and void. So while I celebrate the end of the bombs, for now at least, and of course I celebrate the release of anyone being held captive, I wouldn't be so sure that overall what we're being sold by the political class, the media bobbleheads, and the heavily funded influencers across social media is actually the reality of what's for sale. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has described Gaza as very valuable waterfront real estate, and their enormous marine gas reserves are no secret either. Plus, as already mentioned, those behind this believe it's their land anyway, as promised by God. Well, whether they actually believe God promised it or whether that's just a claim they make in order to get the Christians on board is another question. So, is this actually a peace deal, or is it just one big land grab and natural resource theft, masked as a peace deal? Because if it's the latter, then the so-called peace in the Middle East won't last long. But then it isn't meant to, is it? Peace isn't actually designed to last anywhere. The death and suffering of humanity is far too lucrative for that. So as long as we allow the demons to drive us, they'll always steer us into conflict. They'll always sacrifice the pawns on the grand chessboard for as long as we agree to, perform that role. And personally, I'm done.